welcome to
Hey!
Radio. This is show number 40, and I'll tell you what, this is only about prayer.
Affirmative prayer.
Yeah.
and about Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes.
And spiritual
we
mind
have
treatment, which is our affirmative prayer.
Right. And we have conversations. So we have a wonderful guest today, and her name is Jennifer Berkeley. Come on, Paul. I'm Reverend Rich. This is
Reverend Paul.
And we are PrayersRadio. Would you mind praying us in, Jennifer?
Love to. Thank you. And so let's just take this moment and turn within to that secret, sacred place of the Most High, that place that is pure essence, that place that is pure presence. And as I unify with that presence, I remember who and whose I am. And from that place of remembering, I simply speak a word of blessing for this time that we get to spend together, because this is not something we have to do. This is something we get to do. And so I joyfully move into the getting. I joyfully move into the conversation, the communication, the connection, the love that is shared universally right here and right now. And in the spirit of that love, in the spirit of that life, I simply say, thank you, Mother, Father, God, and so it is. Amen.
And so it is.
Oh, it is. Wow. I like that. Well, we have a wonderful show today. And I've already said that we're only about prayer. And we have, we're going to ask you to tell our audience a little bit about yourself. You have a book, and that book is, do you have that book, or just tell us about it?
I have that book.
Let's see that book. Oh, bring it over. Oh, other way.
Other way.
Keep going. There we go.
There you go. Perfect.
And so this is me. That's my maternal grandmother, my mother, my first cousin who I grew up with like a sister in the same house. And that's me looking off into the distance, which this picture tells my whole story, basically. My whole story.
And we bring it up because we want to preface this, because you said that you're an Italian American, or?
Yes, I'm an Italian. I grew up in a very traditional Italian American family in the Bronx in New York. My grandparents were immigrants from Bari, California, from Bari, Italy. They lived in the basement. We lived in the middle. My brother and mother and father, and my aunt and uncle, who was my mother's brother, lived upstairs with their 3 children. So I grew up in a very active household, a very chatty household, and a very, I'm going to say, boundaryless household, because, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but we were just always moving in and out of each other's life almost seamlessly.
Well, we do that to preface who you are and what you're about. And you're a reverend in Science of Mind. Tell us a little bit about you in terms of that.
Well, a little bit about me in terms of that. I'm just going to say, really quickly, I also grew up in a Catholic household, and I'm not like a recovering Catholic. You know how some people say, I loved my Catholic upbringing because I so believed in God, and I believed that God lived in church. And I believed that if I wanted to talk to God, I had to go to church. So I was very happy to go to Catholic school because we went to church a lot. And so I started my conversations with God at a very, very, very young age. And how I got it, and there was one week, like one short period where you had to go and pray for a vocation when you went to Catholic school. And I knew that I had a vocation, but the only vocation I knew at the time was a nun. And so I used to kneel there and pray because I knew God was calling me, because the nun said, if he calls you, you have to answer. You have to say yes. And I used to sit there and pray, don't call me, don't call me, don't call me. I begged God not to call me. But I knew it was always in me, but I never knew what it would look like. And I was always looking at other, avenues, other channels to God and to oneness, I guess you could say. And when I was 24, I made a big move, and a big bold move, and I moved to Los Angeles.
Mm.
And there I got involved in, some of the things you would get involved in Los Angeles, some of the spiritual things.
Mm.
And it was there that I found Agape with Reverend Michael Beckwith in the 1980s. And I went to one service. I was in a very bad time in my life. I had literally $75 in my checking account. I had just lost my job. I totaled my car. I was going through a divorce. And they announced that today was the last day to sign up for classes, and the down payment was $75. I could get emotional now saying this.
Mm.
And I literally, after service, went to the table and signed up for class, and my life has never been the same. For me, this teaching, I believe, has literally saved my life. Literally, not figuratively, not theoretically, or whatever that word is. It's literally saved my life. And it's a long story after that, which I won't get into. And I became a practitioner right away, went right into prac training at Agape.
Mm.
I had met a friend there who's been my prayer partner for 30 years. We pray every single week. She's in Ojai, California. I'm here, and we pray every week unless she's on another continent or I'm in another, if it's not possible. But we hardly have missed a prayer in 30 years, over 30 years.
Mm.
So I believe in the power of prayer. And,
Can you
my
share
very
some?
first, go ahead.
Can you share some tangible results you got from the prayer?
Oh, gosh. Well, for me, prayer to me is not really asking for something to change. For me, prayer is more about remembering, and I literally use that word, remembering with what already is. And when I used to teach about prayer, I used to say you can pray for form or you can pray for feeling. And I am more inclined to pray for feeling. And the feeling I'm more inclined to pray for is a feeling of reconnection and a feeling of remembering. When I'm
Mm.
in separation, I know it. I feel it. I feel it in my body, mind, spirit. I feel it. And so then my prayer becomes realignment. My prayer becomes remembering. And a very tangible, I'm living in Connecticut now. If you would have asked me 2 years ago if I would be living where I'm living, I would have told you were absolutely crazy. 5 years ago, I would have said you're insane. And I live in rural Connecticut. I have a barn on my property. I grew up in the Bronx in New York City. And I'm living on a property that has a barn. I have a bear that lives in my backyard. And very, very quickly, I will say, the way we got here was pure divine intervention, pure knowing. And my very favorite quote is from Florence Scovel Shinn, who
Mm.
says, "Your word is your wand, follow the lead." And for me, demonstration has never been about the big kahuna, let's say. It's been about the baby steps that get me to where I want to go and allowing myself to be led to where it is I'm meant to be. And it's also a prayer of acceptance of whatever shows up along the way. And I am in this house because of that process. We owned two houses when we decided to move here. One was in Connecticut on a lake. One was in Westchester in New York. We had to sell two houses. We bought this house. We took out a bridge loan. And everybody told us we were crazy to be doing what we're doing. And my prayer in the whole process was never about this house. I want this house. My prayer was anytime I moved into separation or fear, it was about remembering this or something better, remembering the truth of who I am, remembering that I was willing to step out on my fear, step out of my story, and step back into, as one of my teachers, Reverend Nirvana Gale, used to see, my greatest yet to be.
Mm.
Mm.
And that's what prayer is just always meant for me. You know, I've said to people who are going through, serious illnesses or whatever, do you want a cure or do you want a healing? Because they're very, very different things.
Mm.
And even if you're going through something, and I've been through some pretty devastating experiences in my life. And I will say that for me, the healing is the peace and the acceptance. And sometimes it has absolutely nothing to do with the cure. And
Mm.
actually, I write about that in my book. My father was bipolar, and he was also very physically ill. And my mother used to make us stand in front of the statue of St. Jude, who's
Mm.
the patron of hopeless cases, and pray to St. Jude for a cure for my father. And he was cured because he had a surgery that cured him, but mentally never cured, never cured. So, and I don't think he unfortunately had a healing either because he wasn't open to it. And
Mm.
I
Mm,
think that when we have a healing, that's a bigger demonstration. For me, feeling is a bigger demonstration than form. And when I was counseling and people would, ask me, well, I would tell them, I pray for feeling more than I pray for form. If you want form, go see this person,
Mm.
go see this practitioner. They're really good at form. It's not what I do.
well, that's that
But
mental.
but I will. I'm not saying. I mean, I know as a practitioner, you can never deny anybody treatment. So I wouldn't deny the treatment, but I would make recommendation because I know some people are really good at demonstrating form.
Mm.
And the practitioner always prays for their own consciousness.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I was saying that mental equivalent is what you're looking for, I think, on that, and that's that feeling we have, you
yes.
know. So that's, I think, that's
Yeah,
just
one of
frame
my
it.
favorite courses that we teach at CSL is the course on mental equivalence. Yeah,
Nice.
it's the container, right?
Yeah.
How big is your container?
Later.
You could go to the ocean with a little thimble, you still get as much of the same essence of the ocean, or you could go with, a giant bucket and you get a lot more. And that's all the mental equivalent. It's how big is your container?
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's a good takeaway on that. I like that. Hey,
So how do
the
you?
go ahead.
I was wondering how you start your day in prayer. How do you
Mhm.
begin? Can you share that with us?
Oh, come on,
Yes,
talk me through
I'd
it.
love to.
How do you start your day?
Well, I meditate every day. So I always start my day in meditation, and I don't necessarily do it in this order. It really depends on what I'm doing. I get my coffee first. I always get my coffee, and I have a really nice Nespresso. So I make a nice espresso, and then I make the foam. I have to have the foam on top. And so I sit with that and I do my meditation. And it really depends on where I'm at. I if I need to, I'll do my TM meditation. It depends on where I am mentally as
Mm.
to what style of meditation I might do in the day. Because sometimes I'm really not able to just sit. Sometimes I'll have to, stick my buds in and do a guided meditation.
Mm,
Then I follow Julia Cameron and her The Artist Way. I do morning pages. That's part of my spiritual practice. I don't always do the three full pages, but I'm a writer and a poet, so I always, do my writing, and it's just like freestyle writing. It's not even journal. It's just like, follow the lead. That's all that writing is. And then I'm always reading a book. So I'll just read something. Right now I'm reading the Mark Nepo's new book. I want to say The Fifth Dimension, but it's not. Um, it's about this time I am in my life. I'm 74 years old, and it's about really being fully
Mm.
accessible at this time in your life. The Fifth Season is the name of the book by Mark Nepo. So
yep, it's
that's
the fifth season. That's it. Yeah,
yeah, the
19.
Fifth Season by Mark Nepo. It's if anybody who's in that season, I just highly recommend that book. It's
Mm.
remarkable. It shifted me when I first started reading it because I was kind of wowing about being this age and having more years behind me than ahead of me. And I picked up that book and like in the first 10 pages, I had a huge shift about all of that.
So would you say that grounded you somehow, or?
All grounded me. Yeah, you talked about meteors and meteorites and how they move through space and how they shed their shell and just become
Mm.
more light. And I said, oh, I'm just becoming more light. And there's just something about that metaphor that totally shifted me. And he said, at this point in your life, it's not about, because I had just written my book, and getting it's a lot of work, and I'm a teacher. I identify as a teacher in all of the jobs I've had in my life. There's always been a teaching component. And I really wanted my book to teach. And I wanted it out there so it could teach. And I was beating myself up, let's just say, or judging where it wasn't going, and thinking, why didn't I do this sooner? Why did I wait so long to dedicate myself to my writing, etc.? But he said it's not about accumulating in this book. He said it's about shedding, it's about
Mm.
releasing and becoming lighter. And it just totally changed my perspective. And see, for me, that's an answer to prayer. You pick up a book and you read something. If you're doing your work, if you're doing your daily prayer work, if you're doing your daily realignment, your not even daily, your minute to minute sometimes realignment, that's the answer to prayer. And then you read that and you say, oh, following the lead, you know, my word is my wand, follow the lead. This is my word too, because I'm reading it. His word is my word because it's truth. And so let me follow that lead.
So that leading yourself, I mean, that brings us into our next question: the adjustment of the day. What happens when somebody, bam, what is that for the day that shows up in your life? How do you adjust yourself on that when you have triggers or things that show
Mm.
up?
That is a wonderful question, because I'm so more aware of my, as we peel away the layers, we become more aware of our triggers and not less aware
Mm.
of them. And I'm going to say that, my triggers show up mostly with my husband. And I mean, anybody who's, in a relationship, and that makes sense, right? And, my prayer around my relationship with my husband has always been, let this relationship teach me how to love myself more.
Mm.
Mm.
And so when the triggers show up, rather than jumping into, like, I'm not going to jump into a spiritual mind treatment, honestly, in the midst of a trigger, because sometimes it's triggering.
Mm.
Mm.
And what I do this thing, and I used to teach this, is stop. Stop, take a breath, observe what's happening, and then proceed with caution. And that's what I tend to do when I'm triggered. And I see where that leads me. Sometimes it leads me into asking my husband a question to clarify what's happening. Sometimes it leads me into just saying, what you did really triggered me. Sometimes it leads me into saying, I just need to go into my room and sit for a minute.
Mm.
And I do that. So again, I have to follow the lead of what's happening in the moment, because every challenge and every trigger may produce a different need for a different response. And for me, prayer is not just spiritual mind treatment. Sometimes prayer is just a pause. Sometimes prayer is just a retreat. Prayer is, how do I say yes to this moment, even if it feels really crummy?
Mm.
How do I just say yes to this moment and accept this moment? So that's what I do, and it's not always the same thing. And yet, I'll tell you, this morning, it's not a trigger, but it's snowing here, and we feed the birds all year long. And I look, cardinals are my favorite, and I have I have a red cardinal, and I wanted to take a video of that cardinal. Before, it was going to be a sign for me to be able to see that cardinal and take a little short video of it eating on my bird feeder with the snow coming down. And I did it like, one of my quick treatments. There's only one life. That life is God. That life is my life now. And I know that cardinal is just waiting to show up on that bird feeder, and it wants to be there. Thank you for the cardinal. But you know what I did? I kept going back and going back and going back to see if that cardinal showed up. And guess what? Never showed up.
Mm.
Because you can't plant a plant and keep digging it up to see if it's growing. Ernest
Mm.
Holmes tells a story in one of it's either this thing called you or this thing called me or this
Life, yeah.
whatever this thing called you or this thing called life. And he talks about this shopkeeper, and I used to have a retail store, so I'm really familiar. He said, and this guy used to pray every single night, every single morning for customers and customers and customers. And they'd go to his shop, he'd open the door, and he'd watch the people passing by going to all the other stores, and he'd ask himself, why aren't they coming here? And Ernest Holmes says, you can't keep asking that question. Reverend Michael used to say, the questions you ask are going to give you the answers you may not want. But,
Mm.
and he used to say, and Ernest Holmes says, you can't keep going back to see if it's happening. You have to trust that it is. That's what surrender and treatment, right, is all about.
Mm.
It's literally letting it go, releasing it. It's like the burning bowl at the end of the year. Just burn it,
Mm.
let it go, and move on.
That
And then
was
when
the
you feel yourself, say that
that was.
again.
I said that was the last question: is when do you release a prayer into
You
law?
release the prayer at the end of the prayer until you feel out of alignment again. And then you don't necessarily, pray for that prayer, but you pray for realignment. You pray
Mm.
for surrender. Sometimes you can't release. I've been there too. You can't release. So then your prayer becomes a prayer of surrender.
Well, you're saying you're reverend and you're human. What?
Oh, well, and that's what people used to say to me all the time in ministry was, what we love about you is you're so real. Because
Mm.
that's what people want. They want they want that, what is it called? The double helix or the double thread.
Mm.
Mm.
We're human, yes.
You're
And we're
authentic.
divine. We're human
So,
and we're divine. And I have never given up my humanness. I still curse, I still yell, I still get angry, I still get triggered, and I still admit it. You know, I used to remember
we're
years
living our
and years and
spiritual.
years ago that there were ministers that we'd go to conferences and they'd sit outside and smoke cigarettes,
Well,
which is fine. I have no judgment about what people do, but they'd say they treated the nicotine out of the cigarettes. Well, you see, that's another thing I used to teach was you can't treat for something your consciousness can't hold. And maybe that person's consciousness could hold the idea they could treat nicotine out of a cigarette, but
mm.
my consciousness could never hold, humanly, I could never hold that as a belief. And so, how can I treat for that? How can I treat for something I can't humanly believe, but then I can treat to humanly believe something I think I can't human believe, if that makes any sense.
Sounds good.
But
So, Reverend Jennifer, how have your treatments, your prayers changed over time from like being a
uh,
practitioner to now
uh,
being actively retired?
well, my prayers and my treatment, my very first treatment, I remember when took my very first class at Agape, Science of Mind 100 or 101 it was called at the time. My very first treatment that I handed in, I said, "Dear God, it's me, Jennifer." Like the book, "Dear
Yeah.
Margaret, dear God." Yeah, that's what I wrote. And we had two practitioners in every pod because there were 75 people in our class in the
Mm.
1980s. And right away it's like beseeching, begging, because that's how I grew up, and I still prayed that way. I still prayed that way. And the way I would say it most dramatically changed is moving from, well, two things. Now I have a much more personal relationship with God. I don't have to go to a house to
Mm.
visit God and pray in God's house because God is everywhere present, and I can pray wherever I am, doing whatever I'm doing in whatever state I'm in. And second, I don't have to beg God. I don't have to bargain with God. I used to I did a lot of bargaining as a kid, a lot of bargaining, and then even, as even like sometimes driving, I'd say, God, if you just let this light stay green, then it's going to be a sign of this or that or what, a lot of that kind of stuff. I am so far removed from that. So far removed from that. For me, you know, I just practice the
Mm.
presence. I just
Mm.
really try to practice the presence and pray without ceasing. Um, and I live my prayer. And I'll say most importantly, what's changed for me is my poetry now that I have time again to, in retirement, to really focus on my poetry, and I cannot believe like what's being downloaded and what I'm writing now. My poems have become my prayers in a
Mm,
way because they're able to say what I feel when I can't give human words or conscious words to those feelings.
wow, that's
Yeah,
powerful.
I mean, if I could say quickly, just an acquaintance of mine, somebody I know through the spiritual circles, her and her stepdaughter and her husband's daughter last week tragically lost and unexpectedly lost his 30-year-old daughter. And when you're in this teaching and you work with people, you feel the pain as much as you feel the joy
Mm.
sometimes. And I just couldn't imagine the overwhelming grief they were experiencing, but a thread, because I say a thread, because their grief was probably so enormous. And even though it felt enormous to me, it was only a thread compared to what they were feeling, but I couldn't shake it. I couldn't pull it. And so, and I didn't know what to do with it. I reached out to her and I just said, sometimes when we can't depend on our own consciousness, we have to lean into the consciousness of someone else. I can support you in that way, lean in. And then I wrote a poem about it, about them. And the poem was entitled Someone I Didn't Know.
Mm,
And everything I felt,
Mm.
and the poem then became about how we do feel the loss. That's universal. That grief is universal, whether it's the Ukraine or whether it's Australia or whether it's, Rob Reiner's home, or the the grief is universal. And so
Mm.
that poem became my prayer for them.
mm.
And I'm not going to send it yet because it's too soon. I'm going to wait like a month or so and then send it to her and let her know that this is what moved through me
Mm.
as they were
Well,
going through their grief.
we're live, so they're probably hearing this. They're friends of yours.
Well,
Oh, but
but you
but
see,
the thought is there.
that's another important thing. You know how we say in religion science of mind, we can't pray for somebody unless they ask us.
Hmm.
And I think that's true, is we can't pray for specifics, but I can certainly pray for somebody's peace of mind.
Oh,
Mm.
I can
absolutely.
certainly pray for,
Well,
I don't know, comfort,
yeah.
you
Well,
know?
our minds are the only minds that change in prayer. So that when we're doing
Exactly.
the prayer, everything
Exactly.
ripples out in the universe and changes
Exactly.
around us. So
Yes.
we have that in our philosophy. We have that. That.
Yes. Yes.
But hey,
And so that, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
we're at the 3 minute mark, so we got to shotgun these last questions so that we can make
Okay.
sure that we
Sorry.
cover all the bases. And we need to have you back on because you got a lot of good stuff.
Thank you.
We have everybody that's been on the show. It's like, well, we don't do the hour, but we can do the half an hour. Go ahead, Paul. Shotgun those last questions on there.
So how would you explain our philosophy to someone not familiar with it?
Well, the way I explain it is very simple. Just like there are physical laws, there are spiritual laws. And so I have a philosophy that says I can use those spiritual laws just like I use electricity. I can, use it to light a light. I can lick my finger and stick it in the plug and get a shock. Well, I can use spiritual laws the same way. And so I have the
Mm.
tools. So our philosophy provides the tools to use the spiritual laws to our advantage rather than our disadvantage.
Nice.
Nice.
Favorite Ernest Holmes book is?
My favorite Ernest Holmes book is, that's a tough one, but it's probably This Thing Called You.
Mm.
And when I teach and use that book to teach, I make them as they're reading it, I say, change the word you to I, and it's life changing. So if you've
Okay.
never read that book that way, I would encourage you to do so.
We'll
Make
we'll
it
take
first
that.
person.
We always go, no, don't choose the science of mind, and don't choose the thing. There's so many different.
Yeah.
But thing called I is good. Okay, we're good with that one. How about your favorite Ernest Holmes quote?
My favorite Ernest Holmes quote. There are so many, but it's the quote something about prayer where he says, you put, and it's not going to quote him exactly, but that prayer is about, it's about the word and the fire. Like once you get the technique down, then you put the fire into it. And I believe that wholeheartedly, that you have to teach technique first and then you add the
The
fire.
fire.
So that's his my favorite idea of his.
That's awesome. That's like what works. I mean, bam.
Yeah.
So we are at the 30-minute mark. And let's see. Let's go ahead and plug your book.
Okay.
And your book's on Amazon. And you also, we showed the book earlier, but you also have a couple of children's books that you said that you're
I
writing
have one
also.
children's book that I just finished and
There you
I
go.
just finished and published.
It's
And
what
this
the
book was,
Frosty folks.
it's called Frosty Folks of Flurry Hill. I mean, Flurry Hollow. And this, I mean, I can go into a whole story about this book, which I
No,
won't,
no,
but
no.
I started hand knitting characters. And before I knew it, I had a family. And then I said, let me write a book, got the book.
Now,
And
will
then
there
I
be a book?
also have a
Will
book,
there
it's
be a
called
book? Will
Go
there be a
ahead.
book about your poetry?
Yeah, I have a book. It's called Belonging, a Poetry Companion, that I'm actually doing a workshop. I just finished one. I'm doing one in June.
There you go.
There
And
it
these
goes.
are 7 poems with activities and writing prompts that take you from belonging to becoming.
Mm,
Mm.
And so anybody interested in that workshop, you could find me at RevJB18 on Instagram.
there we go. Because we wanted to make sure we got your site plugged in on that. And you're part of the Retired Ministers Corps at
I
CSO.
am. I am very much a part of what I call the Retirement Committee, what we call the
Wisdom.
Alumni Ministers Wisdom Committee, and I do all their
Mm.
communication, their newsletter. We have a monthly meeting called the Golden Hour, and it's a beautiful group of individuals who come together collectively to really continue in ministry, because we say as ministers we never retire.
You never retire,
It's
right?
just not possible. It's a state of mind, and it's not one that you can retire from.
Well, if you won't mind praying us out, that would be fantastic. And then we'll do our final goodbyes.
Okay, I'm happy to. Thank you for asking.
Hmm.
And so now, just continuing in a consciousness that has already been so perfectly established through the conversation, established through the connection, established through the one life, established through this divine, ever present presence, knowing that I am one with it, knowing that it is one with me, knowing who and whose I am right here and right now. And from that knowing, I simply say, thank you. I simply order and offer a word of gratitude. Gratitude for all that has been shared, gratitude for all that has been taught, gratitude for all that has been known in a way that it wants to be known right here, right now, in this moment. And so I gratefully, joyfully release this into the law of life, fully knowing that it ripples forth and multiplies. And for this, I simply say, and so it is.
And so
Amen.
it is.
So it is.
Yay!
Well,
Thank you.
we appreciate you. I'm Reverend Rich of Prayers Radio, and this is Reverend.
Reverend Paul from IamSpiritAlive.com.
And we've had Jennifer Berkeley on with us, and we will put her information inside of the show notes. We highly suggest you check out her stuff because it's brilliant.
Thank you.
And send us pictures of your cardinal when it shows up.
Okay, I will.
Maybe.
It'll be back, but I'm afraid the snow is going to stop, but I'm sure it'll be back.
All
Both.
Right. There you go. All right. So now we say bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.